Bonjour, one and all. That's French, by the way. This is the Omnia Performance Podcast. I am Fergus Crawley.
Big Johnny Payne.
Dr. Phil Price. No pause.
No pause. He's saying
growing
doctor,
in confidence.
Doctor with conviction. For those that haven't listened to the past couple of episodes, Phil Price, who's actually Dr. Phil Price, is a little bit tentative and humble about referring to himself as Dr. Phil Price. But that he is, and as we can all, I think we should all virtually clap for him for that seamless statement of his own name with the title that you've worked very hard to achieve.
Yeah, you did.
And is ultimately the reason that you're here. We don't actually like you, Phil. We just like the academic achievements that you have, and
you just call me Doctor.
Just bring the doctor.
Yeah. Anyway, today we are going to discuss why often on these podcasts and often on Instagram questions, often in YouTube videos, often at any given opportunity, we will have to default to the phrase, "It depends." And we don't do that to be flippant. We don't do that to be dismissive. We do that for many reasons. But to really set out the stall, we do it because hybrid training in general, operates across a very, very broad spectrum. And within that spectrum are millions, well, 8 billion to be exact, but within the training circle, probably less than that, many, many people that have to have different iterations of that spectrum applied to them in their individual circumstances, which is why when we get questions that aren't qualified by context, we don't want to just make statements that we don't back and don't have conviction in, because context is king and specificity, I mean, that's GCSE PE level stuff. Specificity is absolutely king when it comes to fitness, progression, adaptation. And if we don't have the right context to be specific, then we can't actually really give any clarity. And I think this is something that you often suffer with in research and questions whenever you've presented, isn't it, Phil? Is that people expect you to say, the research says this is what you should do as a general statement, but it isn't as simple as that, is it?
No, it never is. Life's way too chaotic to be able to be that sure of what you're saying. Like, the research out there has given you a rough idea of what we currently know based on the investigations that we've currently done. Clearly, there is a lot more to do. So to be so self-assured and very specific answers, I'd question. We spoke about this earlier, didn't we? If someone's saying, this, I know exactly what I'm talking about, I would be very cautious. If they were explaining something similar, but they were saying it in a way of they've got a bit of self-doubt, they're taking a lot of things into consideration. It might be different for certain situations, but we need to learn a bit more in this area. Then I'll be a bit more like, oh, okay, I have a better understanding of where he's coming from, he or she's coming from, what information is currently there, and I can make a decision of what I need to do based on the information, rather than just copy and pasting what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, the discussion we were having a minute ago was how difficult it would be to trust somebody who says, I've got all the answers, isn't it? And a good scientific mind will say exactly what you've said, is that the answers we have are based on the studies we've done up to this point. Beyond that, we've got so much more learning to do that to say this is the answer would make that learning, or that potential to learn, redundant, because you're saying that this is where it finishes. And I guess I'm not sure I could think of any off the top of my head. There are probably a few things that we can say, no, that is the answer. There's probably no more study to be done on that. Up is up, down is down, whatever it might be. But for the most part, as well as us having that kind of understanding that science is ever evolving, and to enter into that kind of scientific thought process, this evidence-based thought process, is to understand that the answers aren't clear, is to understand that the answers are current, and to have that thought process, or to be involved in things in that way, you have to enter into that knowing that your opinion should be ready to be changed at any given moment based on the emerging evidence. So you could say this is the answer we currently have at the moment, the studies that haven't been done X, Y, and Z, and really go into detail with a response, but saying it depends is kind of a good start to that. A couple of podcasts we've done recently, maybe the last 2 or 3, the word multifactorial's come up enough times for that to be on the back of the t-shirt. It depends on the front. It's multifactorial on the back would be a good Omnia t-shirt to write in and tell us if you'd like that to be produced.
we have actually asked this question before, and people did get back to us saying I would 100% buy it.
Oh, okay, wicked. Okay, right. So let's do that.
When will it be produced?
Don't know.
It depends.
It depends.
On many supply
it's
chain
multifactorial. But that is it. That is the bottom line. Is there's too many things. So the example we've been discussing today has been quite often in seminars or in open conversation, or maybe when we're doing webinars and things. People will ask a question, and I guess it's specific to them. That's natural. It's a fair thing to do. It's like if X, Y, and Z, what is A, B, and C? And you're like, well, we could answer that question for you based on the information we've got, which is very limited. So for that individual, the answer is still going to be it depends, because we don't know all the detail. And if we're trying to answer it as conceptually, that we're often doing when we're presenting our methodology or presenting our processes or presenting our ideas, we then have to say, but that only applies to that one individual in that one circumstance based on those very small information parameters that we have. So the real answer has always got to be it depends. And what we're hoping to do when we address questions is give people the tools to go away and then think, this is how I can apply that. These are the different multifactorial elements that work in there. These are the levers that move these levers. And if we can build people the workshop and the opportunity to understand all those different moving parts, then they can go and apply it. Certainly as coaches, if coaches are looking in trying to learn things, then we want to be able to say, well, this is what we know, as opposed to these are the answers. And here's like I say, the workshop, here's the tool, here's the mixing desk, to use another Johnny Payne music analogy. But here's the opportunity to if you want more bass, there's the button. You don't necessarily need more bass. You go work that out yourself. So that's why it all depends.
To use an example from a completely different industry, sport, niche, it's not really a niche, it's quite mainstream, but Sir Alex Ferguson, I think we can all agree, best football manager of all time. And if
Jogstein maybe, but carry on.
I knew you wouldn't be able to keep your tongue on such statements, but nonetheless, Sir Alex Ferguson, unequivocally the greatest football manager of all time. If Alex Ferguson created a PDF, which I'm sure he's very much thinking about doing, saying these are all the things that you should do to be the greatest football manager in the world, we could all take that PDF, we could all apply every single lesson, and the outcome for every single individual in their own management would be totally, totally different because of the variables at play. So we're always quite skeptical to make broad brushstroke statements because of the variables at play. If you look at the variables of a football club, you've got players, you've got commercial directors, you've got sponsors, you've got fans, you've got different communities to manage, you've got different shareholders, you've got all of these inputs that make up what that club is in the back end, in the same way that as an individual, from a training perspective, they have all of these inputs that we cannot generalize in statements. I mean, we could, but we would be doing ourselves a discredit, and we would essentially be falling into the trap that a lot of people fall into the trap of, which is trying to make binary, simple statements for the sake of social media clickability, which is something that we don't really want to compromise on. We want to hold ourselves accountable to that at all times. And if you look at Sir Alex, what he achieved was remarkable. And he did that by equipping himself with the toolbox needed to manage all of the variables at play. And if you were to just shadow him and spend all the time doing that, would you be better equipped to do that yourself? Yes. Would you be able to do it as well as he could? Maybe not. But it doesn't guarantee anything. So what I think any coaches, individuals listening should potentially look towards, rather than quick fix answers or statements that can be applied in a broad sense, is in fact imagining that you have a toolbox that you need to build up, or a portfolio of expertise that you need to develop. And the more developed and broadened and the more experienced that becomes, the better you'll be able to instinctively and intuitively apply that to the individual presented with you. Along the way, will you be able to take a more general take on specific things, like the categories of somebody that's training for lifting and running simultaneously, for example? Of course you will. But the optimal and most specific way to get the best out of an individual is to work within the variables of that individual. All we're doing is trying to condense things down and down and down to closer degrees of accuracy, with the ideal degree of accuracy being through the frame of reference of the individual themselves. If we're then looking at a group training program, for example, then we can look at the frame of reference of a bigger group. What's the general ability? What range are we working within? How do we make sure to cater for that group as a whole? If we're looking at sort of one-on-one, off-the-shelf, more generic things that can be applied, then as long as they're applied within a general frame of reference, then you can, again, generalize a little bit more and work within the parameters of that. But as soon as we start getting too broad, you're kind of just pissing in the lock. at this point, and you kind of you could say that it's not a phrase. It works though, doesn't it?
It is now.
It does. Well, yeah, it is now. For us to generalize, we would be compromising on the principles by which we hold ourselves accountable.
Yeah.
And thus, if anyone's ever expecting to jump onto a podcast and for us to say, this is the secret sauce, this is what you must do, therefore take that away and apply it, and you've solved the problem, that's never, ever going to happen. So just to manage expectations, for any educational offerings that we bring out in the future, that's not what they're going to look like. We will help to equip you with that toolbox, help you develop the skills and the understanding that will give you the expertise to be able to be more intuitive and make more informed decisions on how to work within those degrees of accuracy, depending on what things might look like at your end. But it's the skills of that's the beauty of coaching. That's the beauty of programming. It's applying to the specific set of circumstances. And you can remove the human being from that. And it's in many ways like data processing. You've got a set of data points that has a destination by which the data would like to get to. And therefore, it's up to you to manipulate that data week by week, month by month to get towards the end goal. Along the way, because there is a human involved, there'll be a lot of processing and journey-related, process-related things along the way that need to be accounted and adjusted for. But that's what this is. It's not simply a case of, I've got this set of data points, we would like it to look like this. What do I do to make it look like this? It's done. Fantastic. Thanks for the information, lads. Off we go. So just potentially, if anyone does have specific questions in the future, give us as much context for us to work with as possible so that we won't just default to what I guess is integrity-led in many ways,
well, that's what
and not want to speak out of turn or speculate, because that's no more use to anyone than us giving arbitrary statements is in any ways.
Yeah, we're duty bound to say it depends, really, to a degree, aren't we? As well, you can't say do this, do that. Here's the answer, because if it doesn't apply to that individual, you could be causing harm, and that's the crux of it. I'm hesitant to give direct answers even to one-to-one clients who we've worked with for a few years. You have to say, okay, let's consider all the elements going into this. I've got a sore ankle, or my Achilles is playing up. What should I do about it? The answer is not going to be, well, you do this. It's not like I've got all the answers set up. It's okay. When did it start? What's the issue? Let's have a look back through the volume of training you've been doing. Let's have a discussion about what's going on externally. What were you doing? And there's so many questions that, what am I going to do about my painful Achilles? It depends. And also, usually something like that, I should say, we probably scope out and say, go and see a professional to look at that. But as an example, the answer is got to be, it's multifactorial. I don't know the direct answer, but I do know, or I feel like I am closer to knowing all the different elements that might lead into finding enough answers for us then to be able to hone those answers and find the answer specific to that individual, or a few that we can apply and test, which again is relatively scientific. So, and again, from an academic perspective, when you're producing papers, there is a sense of duty to make sure which is why it's peer reviewed, so you can't just say this is the science. Somebody else has got to look at that and go, well, you didn't do that right. Your methodological approach was skewed. Your bias is here, or you didn't actually interrogate all the evidence, etc., etc. So even that process itself, as you'll attest to, is governed by ultimately it depends profile, which is saying we have to consider all of it. We can't just consider your perspective. You have to sit outside this and be somewhat removed from trying to decide this is the accurate answer.
I mean, we had a conversation, didn't we, regarding being evidence-based, didn't we, earlier? And I was trying to explain how a lot of research gets misinterpreted, because what the study is doing is trying to answer a simple question, okay, based on the methods they choose, the participants they use, etc., etc. So based on what they find, they have to make some kind of conclusion from that information. So if you look at the abstract, usually that conclusion is like a sentence, maybe two. A lot of the time, that sentence will answer the specific question based on what they've got in the methods, participants, etc., but it might not take into account wider things. So, for example, I saw one recently which looked at sequencing order strength endurance in hybrid training or concurrent training, and they found that there was no difference. That might have come about because they use very novice athletes. Couldn't really tell that from the conclusion of the abstract. Now, I could have read that, just the abstract, taken that conclusion, and said, "What? The study says this." So, well, go into the paper, because there's always going to be a limitation section where the academic is going to be very honest about the limitations of the paper, where what we need to take in consideration when interpreting these results. And whenever I meet academics, they're always very doubtful of what they know. They understand the limitations of their ideas, etc., etc. They're never really like you need to do this. They'll have an opinion. Some might be stronger than others, but they are aware that could change, etc., etc. So to think that scientists know everything, then they know everything that they've currently investigated. And then linking all of that into the whole "it depends" argument, I wrote about this in my book, because a lot of what I was talking about in later chapters does kind of contradict some recommendations I've said in earlier chapters. So, for example, one of it was the combination of strength and endurance training into one session. So I was trying to argue that, yes, there's probably a lot of research out there which is looking at like there might be a slight interference effect if you start combining the two into one session, etc., etc. But there's also a lot that says if you use novice athletes, it doesn't make any difference. So I was trying to argue several situations where actually I would go against this research and maybe lean into this research, and also take into account all of this other logistical issues, time, all of those type of things. Yeah. That's why the whole like CrossFit, you've got an hour, strength bit, Metcon, has been so successful and people have seen it because there's so many other logistical things which have made it successful. It's quick in an hour. You can just tackle it with intent. You are getting the stimulus. If there's an interference effect, you probably don't even notice because you're still improving. Most people that do that type of thing are kind of people that just want to be fit. So they see great improvements. And there's so many other instances where you might need to combine it, whether it would be a time issue, whether it would be a consolidating stresses issue. There's a number of different reasons. So that might be a long-winded way of saying it depends, because there's so many different things to take into consideration, which also includes different outcomes from different papers, different logistical issues, social issues. So to be very confident in your recommendations, it's like, I hear the recommendations, but...
Well, I mean, that's why you've written a book, isn't it? Because you otherwise you'd write a 3-page PDF saying this is how to do it. And there's no, you've got to say, you've got a tome there that has to say, well, these are the parameters, these are the inputs, these are the outputs, they're huge, there's all this kind of stuff, and you know, from that you've got to understand how to bring it back down to sort of a practical example for us is we have a question come through, make it up. You know,
the best example is, should I lift in the AM, PM, running or lifting is the real common one.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's a great example of the one we had yesterday. Even when we're given more specifics, the answers aren't there for us. We have to still say it depends. Where it was, I'm an 80 kilo athlete. I'm doing I want to do a 70.3 triathlon. What would be the prerequisites for entry into that, and how long will it take me? It's like, well, we can't answer that. It's impossible to answer that. You know, with all the love and all the will in the world, we can't answer that. With more detail, we can get closer to the answer. But we had to stumble over it and then end up saying it depends, because that's the right answer. It's not because it's a cop-out or an opportunity for us to say, well, you know, maybe buy one of our programs. It's more that we have to say it depends, because there's so many, like in the last podcast with injury prevention, there's so many different multifactorial elements that go in there. Well, what's your training history? How experienced are you from a skill perspective? What's your schedule like? What's your interaction with training like on a day-to-day basis? What is your projected or hoped for time? Is that realistic based on X, Y, and Z? And that's just throwing a few questions out. There'll be hundreds you could.
But most importantly, Johnny, what shoes are you wearing, bro?
There's another brilliant example, isn't it? It depends. What shoes should I buy? Well, it depends. Well, can you not just tell me that it's Innovates and which bloody Innovates should you wear? Or which Vivos do you mean? It depends. You know, well, that's a shit answer, but it's the right answer though, because It depends on how you're running. It depends. I mean, how many pairs of shoes have we been through the last couple of months, Jamie? You know, I've got an office sat with shoes that just did not work for me.
Jamie bought a pair of Hokas that he was so buzzing
did I. I've
with.
got Hokas sat there,
Colorway
like,
was
nope.
sick. We all saw him like, Jamie, those really suit you. They're class. He went on 2 runs and he was sulking. He was like, oh, my foot feels like shit. I think I've got cuboid syndrome. But then you've got somebody on Reddit saying, these are the ones.
Oh, exactly, on paper. We all do it as well. You know, you do your research, you look into the same issue, poor Hoka. They're great shoes, but not for me, not for Jamie, it seems. You go through the process, you think, these work for me, there's a little bit of this, there's a little bit of that, there's some lateral control, I want a bit of blah, blah, blah. You buy the shoe, you run for, you know, a total of 10 miles, and you're like, okay, I've just about crippled myself. These shoes are not for me. I'm going back to Brooks or whatever it might be. It depends. You got to try them. You got to try things out. You've got to test it. You got to work against it. And you can get all the information in the world, and you still land at that. It depends. Let's test it. Let's have a look. Right, we were wrong. Let's go back to the drawing board. Let's test it. Let's have a look, which is the scientific process. Not suggesting people have to buy shoes based on scientific process, but you should probably apply a little bit more scrutiny than those look sick.
More importantly, don't expect somebody else to give you a direct answer on the internet without qualification as to why the answer is being given, and that doesn't just apply to shoe choice. I think that's the key point. It is. Yeah, it is great. For example, I wear Ultra Taurins for my ultra running. And the reason I'm still bashing around in a pair of 4s that are definitely on their last legs is because I think all the new colorways are shit. So what shoes should probably the Ultra Touring 6s, but I can't comment on those because I'm still wearing the 4s because I think the new colorways look like trash. So with that in mind,
I'd rather injure myself.
Yeah, I would genuinely rather wear them to the bone than wear a pair of.
I will wear those Hokas even if it breaks my knees.
Olive green, bright pink, and neon yellow combos. No, thank you. Anyway, I'm conscious of time because I'm going to take you to the airport, Phil, but I need to eat my lunch because then I'm getting back and they're going to run. So I want to have some digestion time and not get pulled in.
What shoes are you going to run in?
Ultra Touring 4s.
Oh,
I thought that was very clear in what I just said, Johnny.
I wanted to write it down so I know
what's in your pasta. It depends.
It's actually a HelloFresh mushroom and truffle pasta. And it was Erin's lunch for this afternoon, and I stole it this morning. So I'm expecting a series of angry and confused texts. Well, confused texts followed by anger when I make it clear that yes, it was I that stole the pasta.
It was I who chopped down.
Am I losing my mind? Or did I eat my pasta? Nope, stole it. Anyway, we have digressed quickly. On
Fergus's behalf, we're very sorry, Erin.
I didn't say I was sorry.
I think that's why I've said it for you.
Yeah, I'll eat it. Wow, this is delicious. No wonder she's so angry. Anyway, thank you for listening. Just a reminder, if you want to hear more of Dr. Phil, head to the Progress Theory podcast.
Yeah, do that.
As there's lots of guests and phenomenal academics in there.
There's a back catalogue in that particular podcast of some amazing insights, some amazing guests, and we're into a new series, aren't we? Where the focus has shifted from what was hybrid to what now?
1%ers, 0.1%ers.
Yeah.
But so I wanted to focus not on just sport, but also professions. So we've had Lindsay Bruce, SES, and astronauts, all of those types of things. You know, what does it mean to get to that level? Because it always seems like
depends, Phil.
It depends, but I like discussing those variables. That's the thing.
Yeah. God, with the worst blokes on the planet.
That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
Anyway,
jump on there and have a look at the Progress Theory. Excellent.
Agreed. Sorry to rush you along there, but just conscious of time because it's a 22-minute journey to the airport.
I think you probably find you got 25 to get there, but that's it depends. Depends on traffic.
Oh, thank you for listening, everyone. Please do make sure to follow, subscribe, do all the podcasty stuff. Thank you very much. And reach out to us on social media with topics you would like us to discuss next. But if they are hyper-specific, please do make sure to qualify them with context. Otherwise, you will probably be met with the response of...
It's multifactorial. Oh,
perfect. Thank you very much for listening.
T-shirt. You got the front. You got the back.
Goodbye.